also a little bit tough about the past year and running all these races, just that they were often so close together. And so, I'd be spending 2 weeks in one country, and then all of a sudden I'd be, in a completely different country, completely different environment the next week.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we hear stories of adventure from every corner of the planet. We interview all sorts of folks who are using their sport to explore the world around them and give you the inspiration you need to get out there and have some fun. So as you saw in the intro, Liz Warner is turning 30 pretty soon, in June actually, so coming up quick, and she has a goal of running 30 marathons in 30 different countries, all raising money for charities in the countries that she's running by the time she turns 30. Well, she's on marathon number 28, and obviously this whole coronavirus thing has thrown her off a little bit. And she's moving her next marathon to virtual, so you'll be able to join her, actually. So it's coming up this Sunday, the 24th. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to runtoreach.com/virtual-marathon, and you can sign up and run with her and raise some money for some of these causes. She's trying to raise $100,000. She's around halfway there and would love to reach that goal. So please join. There's people from literally all over the world going to be doing this marathon to do her 29th marathon. Then she's going to finish her 30th off, hopefully at base camp of Mount Everest, but we'll see. But anyway, hope you enjoy the episode. It was really fun talking to her. And as someone who's also turning 30 this June, I don't know if you thought I was younger or older than that, but I am also in the boat that Liz is in. So we had a lot to talk about around that. And it's definitely something a lot of apprehension around. So, and also I wanted to thank everyone that's reached out to the show lately. I love hearing from y'all. I love when you suggest someone that should be on the show. I reach out to all those people if I think they would make a good fit. So love when you reach out to us, Mason at adventuresportspodcast.com, or find us on Instagram or anywhere else. So thank y'all and enjoy the episode. Folks, welcome to the show. Today's episode, we have a pretty exciting guest, Liz Warner. Thanks for coming on. We're happy to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and folks heard a little bit about you in the intro, but could you tell us where you're coming from today, and if that's not home, where it was home for you growing up?
Of course. So I am now currently in Paris, where I've been based for the past 3.5 years. I grew up originally, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. And yeah, I lived there up until age 18. I went to college in Maine and then moved to Japan, lived there for 5 years. And then, I came to Paris a bit over 3 years ago for grad school originally. So
wow, awesome! And I've heard you talk a little bit about the differences of living in Japan versus Paris for the workload and the I don't know, the expectation from society to work too hard. So it sounds like you're enjoying the pace of Paris.
Yes, it's such a slower pace. Like even compared to, if I had to compare Paris to New York too, it's just, I don't know, people just operate at a very much slower pace here. They're just sort of being, they're not really doing much of anything. I mean, the French, they get their stuff done, but it's a much more relaxed lifestyle, definitely.
Oh man, that's kind of my lifestyle right
Your
there.
Vibe.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
You say you're from Georgia. We're from Florida, but like a very southern area. So I feel like the pace of the South is a little slower too. So that's kind of how we operate. But
definitely.
So, growing up in Atlanta, and now you're doing these marathons all over the world, literally just so exciting. Were you this kind of person growing up in Atlanta, Georgia? And was your family really outdoorsy and adventurous like this?
Yes, I did get the travel bug from a pretty young age. So both my parents are from New York. So that's sort of why I also don't have the Southern accent. I wish I did, honestly, because I find it really charming. Yeah, my dad actually, he went to medical school in France for him because he actually didn't get into a medical school in the US. So he went to France. And I think from him, I really got my adventurous spirit. And I think growing up, I mean, when I look back at my education, it was always sort of, traveling and experiencing different cultures that I feel so privileged, to have been exposed to. I feel like that's where I really grew. And that's just what I really loved doing all growing up. So I think also kind of living life outside my comfort zone has also been always very appealing to me, which is why I sort of moved to Japan on a whim right after college. So yeah, so I think growing up in Atlanta, I mean, Atlanta is also a very cosmopolitan city. There are a lot of international companies there, Coca-Cola, CNN. So I think, there's also really cool international environment also in Atlanta. But yeah, I mean, it definitely felt like I didn't grow up necessarily like in a small town. So yeah.
So this was kind of in the making from an early age. And yeah, you're right. Atlanta is this hub. There's a saying, I think anyone that's going to die in the South has to go through the Atlanta airport first to go to heaven or hell, which is just kind
This
of
is true.
I don't know. I butchered
That's
that, I'm sure.
hilarious. I haven't heard that one, but that's so
They were
funny.
like, that's the terminal, just because it's such a crossroads for so many things and so many international companies based there. But so, what about from the running perspective? Were you a runner growing up, or did you discover that later?
No, I was not a runner at all. I played the sport squash growing up. It's sort of like racquetball. And that was honestly my life, even going into college. I played it also in college, and I didn't really pick up running. I did a half marathon my junior year of college, but again, it was never like I still didn't really consider myself a runner. My father passed away actually my senior year of college, and that's when I just became completely burned out with squash, quit it completely, and then moved to Japan, was in a very weird, lost space. And my Japanese tutor at the time actually told me about this local marathon he was running. It was actually, it's funny, you must all like obviously know about the big Tokyo Marathon, which is part of the like Six Stars, I think.
Hmm.
So this local race in Tokyo is actually for all of the Japanese who didn't get accepted into the actual like official Tokyo Marathon. So he told me about this race, and I at the time I was actually planning on moving back to the US. I'd already been in Japan for almost a year. And yeah, I mean, I had 3 months to train for it. It was this amazing goal ahead of myself. And once I actually did, start training for this race, it just, um, I mean, running completely transformed my life. I, really became sort of this form of meditation for me, just this therapeutic outlet, especially going through this tough period, getting over or sort of grieving for my father's death. Yeah. And then I was just completely addicted to it after that first race.
It is kind of a story we hear as folks finding that something like running after having to grieve about something or having to
Yeah.
get over some sort of obstacle, whether it's some trauma in other ways, or yeah, like you said. But wow, and to do it in such a place that was so new to you, and still so I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure it was a really hard adjustment just living over there, and like you said, the
Yeah.
work environment so strenuous, and this was your outlet. So, did you start doing more after that, or was it kind of a slow climb into essentially getting up to 30 almost now?
Yeah. So after that first marathon in Tokyo, it's funny, like during the race, of course, I was like, I'm never doing this ever again. Because it was also a
Oh
tough
yeah.
race too. It was a very like, it was not very well organized, and there were no distance markers. And I was like, this is awful. Like it was just a very mentally, it was a tough race. And, but yeah, so, as soon as I crossed the finish line, I just felt, I'd never felt such a boost of confidence. And it was funny, around the time that I ran this first marathon, I also happened to I met my now husband in a bar. So, I mean, very long story short, I was planning to move back to the US. I ended up staying in Japan. And, but I was only, yeah, since I was only really supposed to stay in Japan for a year, I was having some visa issues. And so it was a bit of a struggle, coordinating with my company to try to extend my visa. And I told myself, I was like, if I am able to pull this off and extend my visa, for a few more years, I would love to run the marathon in Seoul, South Korea, which was only maybe like 6 months, after my Tokyo marathon. And yeah, I pulled it off. I was able to stay in Japan and extend my visa and sign up for that second marathon. And from there, it just, running marathons just became synonymous with traveling, and especially going to different countries and being over there in Japan. I mean, Japan isn't super close to a lot of other Asian countries, but it's close enough where, you could spend maybe 3-4 days. And I really planned any trip, my one trip a year around that marathon, and going and visiting that other country. So that's sort of how it all developed. And then 6 years after my first marathon, I was almost, 10 marathons in. And that's when I came up with the idea of Run to Reach. It was actually during my honeymoon, and I was living in Paris, really not enjoying my job. I really almost had to give up running just because my working hours were pretty crazy. And I just needed a really big goal ahead of myself. Knew I really missed running and that I wanted to get back into it. And yeah, just the idea sort of popped in my head, almost like you see in cartoons. And I just decided to go for it. And then it obviously turned into a much bigger project when I added the charity component to it. And here we are now, like almost 28
Yeah.
marathons in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what did your husband say when your brand new husband after this? Was it like,
Yeah.
hey, we're spending time together right now, and now you want to
Yeah.
go do all these things around the world?
Exactly. And the worst part is, so Mark, my husband, he was actually, I planned to move to Paris, much before he did, because I came here for school, and it took him almost a year and a half to find a way to transfer, to the Paris branch of his company. And so right when he moved to Paris to finally be in the same city with me, I was like, cool, I'm gonna like leave for the next year and a half. But yeah, I mean, he initially, because I blurted the idea out loud. I remember the exact moment where we were, and he was like, "Are you sure you can take on 20 marathons in a year and a half? Like you've been doing maximum 1 or 2 per year." And so I think he was just really concerned health wise if I would be capable of doing it. But then, yeah, I mean, he just saw me completely light up, and I've always, I mean, I've been sort of working in communications marketing background since graduating college, and I've always wanted to figure out a way how I could use the skills that I've acquired over these years and sort of transfer them, I don't know, to a project that involved what is the word I'm trying to look for? But
Purpose, maybe?
philanthropic, yeah, purpose driven, um, and social entrepreneurship in a way too.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I came back to Paris after that trip, the honeymoon, and I had essentially 2 months to plan everything, which in retrospect, I wish I had 2 years to plan everything. It
That's a
just
lot.
felt, yeah, extremely overwhelming. And not just, obviously to choose all the different races and sort of plan all the travel logistics, but also to choose the different organizations I would be working with and partnering with during this whole project. Because essentially I had to choose 20 of them, since my goal was to work with one organization in each country. So yeah, that was tough. But I think it's sort of how I roll. Like I'm a pretty big procrastinator. I get everything done, probably not the best that I could be doing, but but it's also been a huge learning process along the way. And even though I've been sort of scrambling, and every day I'm sort of figuring out how I can pivot and do things differently, it's just my style. And I also knew that the project was going to evolve, you know, as time went on. And it really did. Even 6 months into the project, I scrapped everything that I had planned. I chose all new marathons, all new organizations, because I actually realized the original list of races that I chose, they were in a lot of countries that I kind of wanted to selfishly travel to. For example, like Cuba and the Seychelles, for example. And yeah, I just decided I was 6 months in, I was in Sierra Leone. I just did a marathon there. And I realized that this project would be so much more interesting for myself and just also for, my small audience, that if I traveled to places that are very rarely traveled to, like Afghanistan or Yemen, Cote d'Ivoire, and it would just be much more eye-opening experience for me if I sort of added that really interesting traveling element to it as well.
That's awesome. Had no idea. I mean, you say you're a procrastinator, don't do things well. I'm looking at your website and like it's all so organized and it's just looks
Oh
so
gosh,
clean. And
I'm glad it looks
I'm
like
like, wow,
that.
okay, here's the 30 marathons with all their associated nonprofits, and then you've got the 10 you did before, and it's like, oh, this is so easy to keep track of, but it just seems like you put this in place and hasn't changed or hasn't had to adjust at
Yeah.
all. But so with these places traveling to some of these more lesser traveled areas, have you noticed a difference in the way the marathons are done, or because they're all organized events, they're not just 26.2 miles you decide to run somewhere. It's an event that you participate in.
Yes,
Okay.
correct. So it's funny. I feel like some of the very remote races that I've run, like I did one in Mongolia last August and it was beautifully organized and it was like in the most random spot. And it was actually a trail race, but it just like, I mean, there were amazing aid stations. It just was and it was a local race. It wasn't even like, international race organizers coming in. So that's what I loved that. And but yeah, I mean there definitely have been some interesting race stories. Like I turned up for my race in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire, and it was 3 days before the race, and they told me flat out that they, all of a sudden decided that they were not going to allow women to run the full marathon distance that year.
Oh wow.
So, and this was already after I had spent, almost 2 weeks in Cote d'Ivoire. Had been working with the organization and sort of trying to put together an awareness campaign about what they're doing. And so, it was like my final days in the country, and it was like, I have to run this race. So it was like this huge battle. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, there have definitely been some interesting race stories altogether, but overall, I would say that most of the races have been very well organized. And I mean, even the race in Afghanistan, there were only 15 international runners. The rest were local Afghan. I think there were even 50 Afghan women runners who did the race. So yeah, overall, I've been very impressed with the organization of all these races.
Do you? It's just so I've only watched marathons, never really participated in something like that. Been at the
Mhm.
start lines of certain things, but not super familiar. What is it like to just stand at the starting line of some of these far off places with these people where you're
Yeah.
probably you do stand out a little bit, and it's now I got to run this place I've never been. I'm sure it to some degree you're used to it at this point, but I'm sure there's a whole backstory of how you ended up getting there.
Oh, yeah. And I think what was honestly also a little bit tough about the past year and running all these races is just that they were often um, so close together. And so, I'd be spending 2 weeks in one country and then all of a sudden I'd be like, in a completely different country, completely different environment the next week. And I think that sort of warps your perception of time. And I remember so often I would wake up in the middle of the night and I honestly couldn't even remember where I was or,
I
which
bet. I
which
bet.
country. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that absolutely you can relate. And but yeah, I mean, I think this, especially the moment right before you start any race, it's just no matter how many marathons or races you run, you always get that sort of tingling, nervous feeling. And I love just looking around and sort of seeing all the different types of people that are around me. And again, like every week it would be so different. And I think especially even definitely probably the marathon of Afghanistan was the most life-changing race for me, just because again, it was very charged just in terms of, yeah, a lot of these Afghan women who were, risking their lives almost training for this race and choosing to take part of it because running is just not really, um, they don't really have that liberty to just go out for a run in Afghanistan. So I think just seeing their faces and just how much more this marathon meant to them than just a simple race. It meant really just asserting their independence and sort of using running as like their own weapon of change. That was really, really powerful. Uh, but but yeah, it's really, I think being back in Paris this past month and sort of sitting still, I'm sort of just starting to process a lot of what I experienced and some incredible conversations I had with a lot of the locals living in these places. And it's sort of just a little bit also overwhelming now, but yeah, it definitely was crazy just to see so many different scenes. And even, I mean, there's a marathon and the one I mentioned in Mongolia, we started the race actually at 3:30 in the morning. So, 2 hours, the first 2 hours of that race were in the complete darkness. So I think even just comparing, not just the people around, but just the environment, they were all so, so different.
I can imagine. Is there one that particularly sticks out to you? I know you've mentioned Afghanistan a few times. Would you say it's
Yeah.
that one? And if not, which one is it and why?
Yeah, definitely Afghanistan too. And also with that marathon, so it was in this area called Bamyan, which is north of Kabul, and it's beautiful. So the marathon itself took place in a national park. And so there were like these towering canyons and these beautiful turquoise lakes sort of scattered throughout the course. So I think that was a really surreal, you know, experience, just sort of looking at this stunning landscape and realizing, I'm in this country that is sort of off limits to a lot of the world. Not really. I mean, it would be irresponsible to say that all parts of Afghanistan are safe to travel to. But like, I mean, just seeing this pristine beauty in a place that's so often, paired with this image of it being war torn, and I think that was just a really life shattering moment, just sort of piecing these two images together. But other really amazing races, I was just actually right when the world started to crumble mid March, this 2 months ago. I did it, yeah, the marathon, and I think I mentioned in Yemen, and it was on this very remote island, almost off of Somalia. And I mean, that was a really special race as well, just because this must have been only 10,000 people living on this island. And they all came out, and there were a lot of locals just cheering on the sidelines. And it's just also sort of soaking in the local surroundings as well. And some of these races have been really special. And especially in a lot of these very conservative countries. I did a race once back in February, it feels like a lifetime ago, in Somaliland. And, having women sort of be on the sidelines, and also it was just me and one other friend running the race as women. And so I think that was also just a really, powerful moment, sort of seeing their reaction, like, oh my God, a woman can actually take on a race or do a marathon. And that was really amazing to see. And, but in terms of just like stunning, stunning marathons and just incredible landscapes, God, there have been, I think
I'm looking at your pictures, and
yeah,
it's kind of like in a slideshow, and I'm just like, these are amazing shots. I can't imagine running through the area because you can
yeah.
and to answer when you answer that, could you tell me what has been some of the difference for you for places you've run through versus places you've maybe traveled to and haven't done a marathon in? How do you see those places different? I'm sure you just get
Yeah.
such a on the ground grassroots view of an area by running 26 miles through it.
Yes. You know, trying to think. Well, I did a marathon last March in Guatemala, and that was a very interesting. It was actually my first trail marathon. Because before that, I feel like the first 10 marathons I'd ever run were mostly on road, and trail races are completely different and require, it's tougher. I mean, running up a mountain is very different than running up like a slight incline on a road.
Right.
So but yeah, so that race in particular, we are half of the race, so 13 miles about, was running up an active erupting volcano. And
Wow.
I mean, it was completely safe, but there was sort of ash spewing up at the top. And so I think, again, we landed in Guatemala maybe a few days, maybe 5 days before the race, and we sort of saw this volcano at a distance erupting. And then it was just completely surreal during the race, actually sort of looking up and being on the volcano itself. And that being a part of the marathon experience was truly epic.
I can
So
imagine.
yeah, in that, again, just like soaking in the surroundings, like that is a perfect example of just being like, oh my God, I cannot believe. And I would never have otherwise experienced that probably if I had not run that race. But yeah, just truly incredible places.
That is so awesome. I mean, I'm looking at you got me every time someone starts talking on this podcast. I've got my screen. I'm like just start googling images and I'm seeing this plume of clouds rise over this volcano in Guatemala, and then a trail going by it. I'm
Yeah,
like, maybe that was the trail and the experience. I can't imagine running by that and seeing it just kind of off in the distance. What a cool experience. And I'm looking at your schedule, and you've got Somaliland marathon, then you've got the Publix Atlanta marathon, and then the
yes,
marathon in Yemen. And I'm like, wow, Atlanta had to be such a strange juxtaposition right in the middle of those two.
absolutely. Yeah, it's when I was creating the schedule, of course, so instead of the Atlanta Marathon, originally I was planning on doing this marathon in Siberia in Russia, which would have been amazing. And I still really want to do it. But this is when I sort of scrapped the original marathon plan. It was, even from a development perspective, it was actually quite hard to find a really interesting NGO that I wanted to work with there. Not that they don't exist, but it's just harder to work as sort of a I didn't speak Russian, and it was just a very remote location to find a cool organization to support. So yeah, and I found this incredible nonprofit in Atlanta called Back on My Feet. And a number of the organizations that I work with, the topic is a lot of times just empowerment through sport. And so Back on My Feet, they work with the homeless population around Atlanta. I believe they also operate in a few other cities in the US, and sort of get them on a running schedule and sort of show them the process of training for something, and building your strength. And so yeah, I found this amazing NGO there, and I decided, I'm going to go home and run my first marathon in the US and have it be part of this whole journey. So yeah, crazy juxtaposition of races, but I actually think that's what made it really cool and grounding as well. It was really nice to see my family also during this crazy mission, because also, I mean, right after Atlanta, as you mentioned, I went straight to Yemen, and I almost got stranded there, like right when the whole like COVID situation was happening and sort of all of the borders were closing. But so yeah, so when I think back to the Atlanta Marathon, it was just a very relaxing, grounding experience, I think, compared to some of the other races.
I'm sure. I'm glad you didn't get stuck there somewhere you didn't want to be, wherever that is in the world. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
right around mid March, so that was very
Yes.
close. Holy cow! It's funny. Back on My Feet, I actually have a friend that works there, And
Really?
yeah, I've been actually
Very cool.
looked it up and obviously talked to them about it. But very very cool. It's so cool to see that on the list. Honestly, that's really
Yeah.
neat. But wow, so you are geez, just dangerously close to the end of this, and it's got to be strange. You know, it's like 20 mile, 23, 24 of a marathon. You're like, holy cow, I'm almost there. You know, I've only got two to go. But with this whole situation, you know, that things aren't going to plan again. And so I see your next one is actually a virtual one, but could you share what your plan is around finishing? Because we've actually talked to a lot of adventurers lately that are very close to completing something. I know one guy. We actually just had a guy on who has visited every country in the world except one, and it's because coronavirus has
No.
eliminated the plan, and it's still tentative. It's in the fall, but it's such it's North Korea, so there's this
Oh man.
all sorts of planning needs to go into that, of course. So even anything that's disrupting plans up until late summer is definitely threatening that. So he thinks it's going to be canceled. So it's thrown people's plans off, to say the least. So how has it been for you, and how is it, how are you adjusted and all that, and what's your plan moving forward with this?
Yeah. Just like with everyone, so originally to the last two races, my 29th marathon was supposed to be in Greece. And then I actually had a TED talk that was supposed to be a couple of weeks ago. So that's why I was going to stay more local. Oh, thankfully, it's not canceled. It's just postponed until September. And then my last race was supposed to be on Everest Mountain, which would have been amazing. And, you know, there had been so many plans in the works for a film crew was supposed to follow me there to do a short documentary series. And, but anyways, that all obviously fell through, and that's life. And we're all going through this together. And there's been very little time to, feel sorry for us all, just because, again, it's just the world has just turned all of our lives upside down. So, yeah, I got back. Thankfully, I returned to Paris in time before, like literally an hour after they shut their borders. I received a ton of messages from family and friends just being like, it's okay if you have to postpone your project. Everyone will understand. Like, who cares if you do it, if you finish it up in the fall. But I said, no, no, no. Like, I'm actually feeling very ready to wrap up Run to Reach. And I feel like there's this momentum now and this energy to keep pushing and to keep going. So it's actually been a beautiful experience planning this virtual race. So yeah, essentially I decided Marathon 29 was going to go virtual. And I've been pouring all of my energy into not only getting people signed up, but runners from over 100 countries signed up. So that's been my really big goal, which has actually taken a lot of time to plan and just a lot of outreach and asking friends of friends if they could connect me to runners in these very random countries. So, but it's honestly, it's been a beautiful silver lining in this whole crisis period, just because, to be honest, I've found fundraising pretty difficult with my project just because I've been fundraising since last January. And it's sort of like you reach this point where you can't really, it's hard to continue to keep asking people to donate. And with what's happening now with COVID-19, I'm actually with this virtual marathon fundraising for the WHO's COVID-19 response fund. So I'm really trying to tie in what's happening obviously now with my project and just with, getting people involved with Run to Reach and getting them signed up to the race. It's definitely made fundraising a lot easier and a lot more fun. And it's just been amazing the past couple of weeks connecting with runners in Bhutan and Iran and Kuwait, truly like all over the world. So I actually feel very grateful, not grateful for COVID-19 happening, but, grateful for this opportunity to have
Hmm.
come out of this whole situation now.
Yeah, in a way, a blessing in disguise to connect with more people,
Yeah,
maybe fulfill your goal even more so than if it would have stuck to plan. And that's kind of how life happens. And are you still keeping? I
absolutely.
didn't realize your Everest marathon for your 30th was actually climbing Everest, correct?
Not exactly. I
Okay.
wish I could say that.
Okay. I thought you just mentioned that. I thought you said, yeah, I want to summit ever. And I was like, holy cow, I didn't
No,
realize
no,
that's
no,
what it
no.
was. I'm sorry. Okay.
I wish I was that fierce. I wish. No, it was we had so the marathon itself, it was supposed to start at base camp. So we would hike to base camp and then the marathon would start from there. So not from the summit.
Still
But
pretty incredible.
yeah, yeah. And I still really hope to do it. I mean, I'm still technically signed up, and so hopefully next year I can still do it. But yeah, but with my 30th race now, I mean, so this virtual race will be number 29. I'm still unsure where my 30th marathon will be, just because again, like even now, they still don't know if they're going to open the borders by beginning of June. So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a big TBD. But I have faith that something will work out, and it'll probably be a marathon I do on my own. But again, I think we can only do so much with the circumstance now, and I do feel very motivated to finish this project and to keep the momentum going now.
So close. Wow. Well, can I ask you this? When do you turn 30? What day?
Yes, I turned 30 on June 8th.
June 8th.
Yeah, almost, yeah, 4 weeks from now, about. So 4 weeks left.
Is there something about 30 that either scares you or just sounds, some sort of obviously the completion of your 20s? Was that kind of just what
Yeah.
was on the horizon for you when you planned this?
So, it's really funny. I'm not a birthday person at all. Like, certain people are just
Oh,
like
you're talking
crazy
to
about
one.
their birthday.
I
Really, you are?
What? No, it's not birthdays. I love gifts. I really
Okay.
love my gifts on my birthday.
That's hilarious. And I respect that. I really do. And it's funny. I think people like with this whole mission and with it sort of surrounding my 30th birthday, it's like everyone assumes that, I'm so scared of
Yeah.
this like looming birthday. But in fact, for me, it just kind of was, when I came up with the idea, I was 28 and a half. I had a year and a half to do this. And it's sort of like, fitting in, it was a fun little hook as well, like this 30 before 30 idea. And, I feel very at ease with turning 30. Like, I think even the amount of like wisdom and experience that I've sort of gone through over the past year, I definitely feel more grounded going into this next birthday and just a lot more humbled by all of these experiences. So, but yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind 30 I mean, it will feel like a big birthday to me, obviously, now with this whole project behind me. But yeah, it was never like this huge birthday that I was dreading from the beginning.
Well, that's good. As much as I
Yeah.
do like my birthday, I'm not looking forward to my next. I actually turned 30 as well, June 20th this year. So
No
just a
way.
couple weeks after
Wow.
you. And so when I saw this idea and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to you because,
Yeah. And how are you
it's
feeling about
looming.
your 30th birthday? Do you
Yeah.
find it's looming for you?
Yeah, I'll say 25 was hard for some reason. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 25. I felt like I used to could lean on, oh, I'm just right out of college. I'm still figuring things out, or
Yes.
I'm traveling full
Yes.
time like I was doing when I met my wife. And yeah, it's been weird. It's been interesting. It feels like the 20s have lasted forever, honestly, which is great. But
Yes.
yeah, had some adventures planned for the day of, but those got canceled with the whole corona. But it's totally fine. Just like you, moving things to next year. But we're excited. My wife's a little older than me, and I don't let her forget it. So it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you've been 30.
That's so
Like it's
funny.
no big deal to
Yeah.
you. But
Yeah.
but no, that's too funny. I just thought, oh, this is such a cool thing to close out a decade and open up a new decade with. And so let me ask you this: if this is going to be, you know, I mean, this is obviously just a huge project, a huge completion. Is there anything,
Yes.
and you might not even have time to do this, but is there anything on the horizon that you're kind of looking at beyond this for a project or something you want to turn this into or just have a goal after this? Because that is something we talk about a lot too on the show is you complete a huge adventure and it's like,
Yeah.
well, now what? You know?
Yeah. I am only halfway to my fundraising goal. So I'm about a bit over 40,000, almost $45,000 raised over the past year. My goal originally was 100,000 because, the idea was to give, because I've been working with 20 organizations and to give a substantial amount to each at the end of this. So I still very much want to continue to, I mean, I'm fundraising has been a very hard part of this project, but I still really want to try to reach that goal. If that takes me 6 months or another year, like I still really be pushing for that. And it's still very unclear how I want to continue Run to Reach, because I think, I don't want to let this whole project die. And, I don't really want to let it just be like a year and a half long adventure, but I just don't know quite yet how I want to let it evolve. And I think at this point too, what's been challenging about this project is that I've been sort of a one-man show. And I truly believe, like, you can only do so much as one person. And I would love to, I think what I've also been missing the past year is just collaborating with people. And I think what's been really scary about taking on this project is that I've just sort of been doing everything as I feel like it should be done. But I've definitely missed bouncing ideas off of other people. And so for this next step, like I'm actually kind of looking forward to getting a normal job again. Definitely looking forward to having a stable income again after this. So I think those are things that I'm looking forward to next. But I definitely still, I am really looking forward to hopefully doing more public speaking, and through that, hopefully I can extend my fundraising efforts. And I still definitely want to be working in this, in the development world to some capacity. I don't exactly know how yet. But yeah, and after Run to Reach, I've already signed up for a 100-kilometer race. That's in October.
Oh,
It
wow.
still hasn't, it still hasn't been canceled yet. It's in Tunisia. So I think, I always need something ahead of me to continue to work towards. And I think that's what I love about marathon running or signing up for races. It just gives you something always to look forward to. And I know now it's like so many plans are canceled, but even for me, just having like imaginary goals in mind are very helpful and important to me. And, again, going back to my fundraising goal, it's something that I feel, I don't want to just be okay and, finish Run to Reach and be like, okay, well, I raised this much and that's as good as I can do. Like, I still feel like this is what life is about, to continue to, reach for the unreachable. Because even, $100,000, it still feels very unreachable to me, but I still want to go for it. And I should mention too, I'm going to plug in here. I just launched a final fundraising push in hopes of getting 2,600 people to donate $26 ahead of my final 26 miles. So this would actually bring me to my fundraising goal. So, that's a very big number. And I
Hmm.
do not think my network extends to that. But I am hoping, again, just, what we're all going through now. I feel like we just need to be reminded to look after each other, but also, remind ourselves how fortunate we all are during this whole crazy crisis situation, and just the importance of continuing to give to strangers in need. So that's sort of the message that I'm trying to push over these next final 4 weeks of this project. And we'll see how it wraps up. I mean, it's still kind of a big question mark, especially with my last marathon not even being planned now.
Right, right. No, it's kind of wild, but you seem like the type of person that just kind of lets things take their course in a lot of ways as well. There's a lot of hard work
Yeah.
into it, but this idea seemed to happen organically in a lot of ways, and I think
Yes.
it's kind of moved in certain ways, and obviously with this whole situation, it's forcing all of us into certain criteria and certain directions. But No, and with the fundraising, I definitely want to be encouraging to you. Fundraising's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever
Yeah,
done, and a lot of
it's
my
so
trips
hard,
have been
right?
in conjunction with fundraising, and it's just so hard to hit
Yeah.
those goals. Way harder than the running is, and
Oh my God. Yes.
but at the end of the day, I always say, like, my last fundraiser, it hit like maybe 30-40% of what I was shooting for, and it was like, what, that's thousands of dollars that wasn't there before. I set
Right.
this arbitrary number in my head, and if I don't hit that, if I would have set it this much lower and I hit it, that just would have been what it is. But you shoot so high, and that's 40 grand these places didn't have before, and that's something to talk about. But I do encourage you to continue and to see where this leads. It's such a cool project, and
Oh, thank
yeah.
you.
So we'll be is the best place to follow you in the last few marathons, I guess, Instagram or your website. Could you share where folks
Yes.
can find out more and where they can donate as well?
Of course. So, yes, my Instagram, the project is so it's at Run to Reach. So, RUNTOREACH. I'm also on Facebook, Run to Reach. My website's runtoreach.com. So, pretty consistent across all three. And so, the donation page, I actually set up a separate GoFundMe page for this particular final fundraising push. And all that information is on my website, also on my Instagram as well. And I made a very fun campaign video. I put together a lot of content that I took from the past year to sort of show all of the cool places that I've been to and run in and some of the organizations I worked with as well. So I encourage you to check that out as well. And yeah, thank you so much for your support. I'd also love anyone to join for the virtual race. Again, it's you choose your distance. I want this race is really meant to be as inclusive as possible. And, it's turning out to be such a really cool global run.
That's awesome. And when is it? It's taking place on May 24th, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. That is exciting. I want to see if my wife and I will interested. We got a track near
Yes,
our house, and I'm not
please.
much of a runner, honestly, but we can. She runs every day, so maybe I'll get out there with her. But no, this is great. Coming from another, a fellow going on 30-year-old. This is very inspiring, very
Yes.
exciting, and definitely gets me excited to try to muster something up before the next month and do something that's meaningful like this. So thank you, and thank you for sharing
No,
your
thank
your
you.
story and your journey, Liz. This is really cool, really great
Oh,
idea, and congratulations on being so close to completing it.
oh, thank you so much, Mason, again for having me on.
Yeah, and yeah, safe travels with everything. We'll be talking soon.
Sounds good.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.